Welcome back to Untold Revenge Files. Today, the story you're about to hear takes place in Millbrook, Pennsylvania. My name is Denise Carter. I'm 38 years old, and I'm a mother who had to choose between the woman who raised her and the daughter she was raising. And I would make that same choice every single time without blinking. Let me set something straight before we begin. I grew up in a household where family loyalty wasn't a value. It was a rule. You didn't question your elders. You didn't talk back. You didn't set boundaries. You showed up. You gave everything. And you said thank you for the privilege of being needed. My mother, Patricia Carter, ran her world like that. And for most of my life, I fell right in line. My father left when I was 11. After that, it was just me, my mom, and my younger sister Jolene. Mom poured everything into a small bakery she opened on Cedar Avenue called Patricia's Sweet Spot. That bakery was her kingdom. She talked about it more than she talked about us. She sacrificed for it more than she ever sacrificed for her own daughters, and she expected us to do the same. I worked in that bakery from the time I was 14. No pay. No thank you. Just my mother's voice ringing through the kitchen saying, "Family doesn't charge family." Jolene worked there too, but she always got the easier shifts, the shorter hours, the softer words. I was the workhorse. Jolene was the princess. I told myself that was just how mothers worked. Some daughters carry the weight so others don't have to. I buried the unfairness so deep I almost forgot it existed. When I married Derek, things got complicated. Derek saw through my mother immediately. He'd say, "Denise, your mom doesn't love you. She manages you." I defended her every time. That tension chipped away at us slowly, painfully, until we couldn't hold it together anymore. After the divorce, I got primary custody of our daughter, Maya. Derek took a job in Seattle, and it became just me and my girl in our small apartment on Birch Street. Maya. 13 years old, thoughtful, talented, and absolutely on fire with creativity. She spent every free moment drawing. Characters with wild hair and glowing eyes, fantasy landscapes, entire universes born from her imagination. She'd been following free online art tutorials for over a year, but she was ready for the real thing, a structured digital illustration course taught by professional artists. The only barrier was hardware. She needed a laptop powerful enough to run the design software. "Mom, what if I earned it myself?" she asked one night, cross-legged on the living room floor with her sketchbook in her lap. "Like a real job. I want to buy it with my own money." My heart swelled. My baby wanted to work for her dream, but she was 13. The options were thin. That's when my mother called, almost too perfectly timed. "Bring Maya to the bakery," she said warmly. "She can help out after school a few hours. I'll pay her $14 an hour. It'll teach her work ethic." Everything in my body tightened. I knew that bakery. I knew what working there really meant. But Mom sounded genuine. Even Jolene texted separately saying, "Let her come. It'll be a bonding thing." Against every instinct screaming in my chest, I said yes. Week 1 was fine. Maya came home with flour on her apron and stories about decorating cupcakes. She calculated her earnings on a sticky note taped to the fridge and circled the date she'd have enough for the laptop. By week 2, the cracks appeared. She started coming home past 7, then past 7:30. I called Mom. "Oh, we just got a little backed up today," she said breezily. Maya wanted to stay. When I asked Maya, she just mumbled, "Grandma said she needed me." Week 3 brought bruises, small purple marks on her forearms from carrying 50-pound flour bags. "Aunt Jolene told me everyone has to do the heavy stuff," Maya said quietly. She wasn't complaining. She was justifying. And that difference made my blood run cold. Before I tell you exactly what my mother did next, tell me, what time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I'm really curious to see how far this story will travel. By week 4, Maya stopped drawing entirely. She'd come home, pick at her dinner, and pass out on the couch by 8. No sketching, no talking about her art course. The fire behind her eyes was going out, and I was watching it happen in real time. When I asked about breaks, she said she didn't really get any. "Grandma says breaks are for people who don't want to succeed." She was 13 years old. 13. I called my mother at the end of week 6. Maya had worked roughly 180 hours. At $14 an hour, that came to over $2,500. Mom, when are you going to pay Maya? She's earned it. Silence. Then a laugh. Not a kind laugh. A laugh that tells you the mask has finally crumbled. Pay her? Mom said. Denise, I'm not paying that child anything. My stomach fell through the floor. She's family, my mother continued, calm as ice. This was a learning experience. She should be grateful I gave her the opportunity. You think anybody handed me money when I was building this bakery? I heard Jolene cackling in the background. Actually, cackling. You promised 14 an hour, Mom, I said, my voice splitting despite everything. Oh, stop being dramatic, Denise. She iced some cakes and swept the floors. That's not real work. Be thankful I let her come. And then, the moment that will haunt me until the day I die, I heard Maya's voice behind me, tiny, shaking. She'd been standing in the hallway listening. Mom, they're not going to pay me? The look on my daughter's face, the confusion, the hurt, the absolute betrayal from the people she trusted most, it burned itself into my soul like a brand. I had no idea that the next 48 hours would shatter our family forever, and that I'd be the one holding the hammer. Sleep didn't come that night. Not even close. Maya had walked to her room and closed the door without a sound. No crying, no slamming. Just the soft click of a latch and silence on the other side. That silence was heavier than any scream she could have let out. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, scrolling through 6 weeks of text messages from my mother. Every single one was a performance. Every single one was a lie. Maya's doing wonderful. She's a little natural. We just love having her here. Not one mention that they never planned to pay my child a single dollar. I replayed every warning sign I'd brushed aside. The late nights, the bruises on her arms, the exhaustion so deep she couldn't hold a pencil, the way she stopped talking about her art course like she'd already given up on the dream. I had watched my daughter's light get drained out of her week by week, and I'd let it happen because the people draining her shared my last name. Morning came. My mother called at 8:15 as though the previous night was a figment of my imagination. Denise, I need Maya here by 3. We've got a large order for the Hendersons' anniversary party. I let out a breath that felt like it had been locked in my chest for 30 years. She's not coming back, Mom. Excuse me? You heard me. She's done. The sweetness in her voice evaporated instantly. You're going to do this? Over a few dollars? I gave that girl my time, my kitchen, my expertise, and this is what I get? You worked a 13-year-old girl for 6 weeks without pay, Mom. That's not mentorship. That's exploitation. She made a disgusted sound. You sound ridiculous. Call your sister. She'll set you straight. Maya barely did anything worth paying for. So I called Jolene, and Jolene was somehow worse. Denise? Honestly? Maya was slow. She whined. Half the time I had to redo everything she touched. Mom gave her a gift and you're too entitled to see it. She paused, then twisted the knife. You've always been like this. Dramatic. Ungrateful. Exactly why Derek left. There it was. The family playbook. Denise is dramatic. Denise is too sensitive. Denise doesn't appreciate anything. I'd been hearing those scripts my entire life. They used to paralyze me. They used to make me apologize for my own pain and beg for scraps of approval. Not anymore. That afternoon, I drove to my best friend's house, Keisha Lawson. We'd been inseparable since college. She worked as a paralegal at a firm downtown and had the kind of mind that turned emotions into strategies. I sat at her dining table and laid everything out, the texts, the hours, the bruises, the laughter, the refusal to pay. Keisha listened to every word without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned forward and looked me dead in the eyes. Denise, let me ask you one thing. If Maya's school principal had done this, worked her for free, no breaks, heavy labor, laughed in her face, What would you have done? I would have called the police before lunch. Then why does your mother get a different standard? That question cracked me open. Because she was right. I had been extending grace to my mother that I would never offer a stranger. Not because she earned it, but because I'd been conditioned since childhood to believe her comfort mattered more than my daughter's dignity. Have you ever had a moment where the fog just lifts? Where you suddenly see the truth so clearly it almost blinds you? That was my moment, sitting in Keisha's dining room with mascara running down my face. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't being ungrateful. My mother and sister had stolen 6 weeks of labor from a child and felt righteous doing it. That night, after Maya fell asleep, I sat at my desk and built a plan. Not a revenge plan, an accountability plan. I pulled up the Pennsylvania Department of Labor website and researched child labor laws, maximum hours for minors, mandatory break requirements, compensation regulations. My mother had violated virtually every single one. I made 3 phone calls the next morning. The first was to the State Labor Board. I filed a formal complaint for child labor violations and wage theft against Patricia's Sweet Spot. I provided dates, estimated hours, screenshots of text messages, and Maya's own description of her working conditions. The second was to a local journalist named Rachel Owens at the Millbrook Register. Keisha knew her professionally. When I told Rachel the story, she went silent for nearly a full minute. Then she said, "I want to cover this. Will you go on record?" The third call was to an IRS tip line. Because Keisha had raised a sharp point, if my mother was using unpaid labor and not reporting it, there were likely deeper financial problems hiding in those books. Every step I took was legal. Every step was documented. Every step was deliberate. I wasn't acting from rage. Rage burns fast and leaves ashes. I was acting from clarity, and clarity builds cases. I picked Maya up from school that afternoon and took her for milkshakes. She stirred hers without drinking, eyes fixed on the table. "Mom? Did I do something wrong?" My throat closed completely. "No, baby. You did everything right. You worked hard, and you deserve every penny. I'm going to make sure you get it." She looked at me with red, exhausted eyes. "I just wanted my laptop." The next morning I woke up drained, my body aching from a sleepless night and the weight of what I'd set into motion. But underneath the exhaustion, something new was growing. A quiet, unshakable resolve. For the first time in my life, I wasn't protecting my mother's image. I was protecting my daughter's worth. I was done being the daughter who stayed silent. It was time to be the mother who stood tall. Everything moved faster than I ever anticipated. Within 48 hours of my complaints, a state labor investigator named Thomas Hadley reached out. He was methodical, professional, and clearly disturbed by what the evidence revealed. His team visited Patricia's Sweet Spot, reviewed records, or rather, the glaring absence of records, and conducted interviews with both my mother and Jolene. From what I learned afterward, my mother tried to sweet-talk her way through the entire investigation. "Oh, she's my grandbaby. She was just spending time with her grandma, playing around in the kitchen." But investigators don't operate on charm and homemade cookies. They operate on facts. And the facts painted a devastating picture. No work permit filed for a minor. No break logs. Hours that exceeded every legal limit for a child her age. And absolutely zero compensation documented or paid. The bakery was cited for multiple child labor violations and wage theft. The state levied a fine of $47,000 against Patricia's Sweet Spot. Operations were ordered to cease immediately until full regulatory compliance was established and verified. Then, Rachel Owens published her article. The headline read, "Beloved Local Bakery Under Investigation for Alleged Child Labor Violations." She protected Maya's identity. She was a minor. But the details were damning and specific. The story spread through Millbrook like a brush fire in August. Neighbors who had ordered wedding cakes and holiday pies from my mother for decades were appalled. The bakery's social media pages were flooded with angry comments and one-star reviews. Longtime customers publicly distanced themselves. Churches that had partnered with her for fundraisers quietly severed ties. If you think I felt triumphant reading that article, you'd be completely wrong. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of Maya's school, staring at my phone screen with my mother's bakery name in a newspaper headline, and all I felt was a deep, hollow ache. That was my mother's life's work in that article. The bakery I grew up in. The kitchen where I learned to braid dough before I learned to braid hair. Watching it collapse didn't feel like victory. It felt like mourning something that was never truly what I believed it to be. But then I'd look at Maya, at the fading bruises on her forearms, at the sketchbook she was finally opening again after weeks of darkness. And the ache would settle into something quieter, something that felt like necessary truth. Some things need to fall apart when they were built on the silence and sacrifice of people who deserved better. Weeks turned into a month. The IRS audit uncovered additional irregularities in the bakery's finances, unreported cash income, fabricated deductions, discrepancies stretching back years before Maya ever stepped foot in that kitchen. My mother's problems were compounding, and not a single one of them was manufactured by me. I had simply opened a door that should have been opened long ago. What investigators found behind it was entirely her own construction. If your own family ever made you feel crazy for simply telling the truth, drop a comment below. I need to know I'm not the only one. Meanwhile, Maya's world was slowly coming back to life. The state ruled that she was owed $6,800, her original wages plus statutory penalties for the violations. When the check arrived in the mail, I handed it to her at our kitchen table. She held it with both hands and stared at the number for a long time. "This is really mine?" she whispered. "Every single cent. You earned it, Maya." She bought her laptop that Saturday, a quality refurbished model perfectly suited for her design software. She saved the remaining balance in a savings account we opened together at the credit union downtown. That evening, she sat cross-legged on her bed, stylus in hand, drawing for the first time in what felt like forever. I leaned against her doorframe and watched her work, and something inside me cracked wide open. Not pain this time, but relief so deep it made my knees weak. She enrolled in the digital illustration course the following week. Her instructor emailed me after the second session to say Maya possessed remarkable natural talent and an unusual emotional depth for someone her age. I read that email 4 times. Then I printed it and taped it to the refrigerator right where Maya's old earnings calculation used to be. Around that same time, I ran into my cousin Terrell at the grocery store. Terrell was Jolene's ex-brother-in-law, someone who still hovered around the edges of the family but kept a careful distance. He caught my arm near the produce section and lowered his voice. "Denise, I know it's probably not my business, but your mom's falling apart. The bakery's shut down completely. Jolene took off to Harrisburg last week. Said she couldn't deal with the stress. And people are talking, asking questions. Not just about Maya, about former employees, about the books, about everything." He paused, shifting his weight. "For whatever it's worth, I think you did the right thing. That little girl didn't deserve any of what they put her through." I thanked him and drove home in silence with the radio off and the windows down. Knowing my mother's world was crumbling around her should have felt like justice, like sweet, earned vindication. Instead, it felt like balance, raw, painful, necessary balance. The kind that emerges when you stop holding up a building that was never structurally sound and finally let gravity do what gravity does. Jolene tried calling me twice that month. I let both ring through to voicemail. The first message was venomous, accusations, insults, the word traitor spit out like something rotten. The second was softer, almost desperate. "Denise, Mom's really struggling. The fines, the audit. She can't manage this alone. You need to call her. You owe her that much." I listened to that voicemail sitting on my porch steps, watching fireflies drift across the yard. For a brief, vulnerable moment, I considered calling back. Old programming runs deep. Decades of conditioning don't dissolve overnight. Then I remembered Maya's face in the hallway, her trembling voice. "They're not going to pay me?" I deleted the voicemail and went inside. Knowing my mother was finally facing consequences for how she treated people didn't feel like triumph. It felt like the stillness after a long, violent storm, quiet, heavy, and strangely sorrowful. I wondered if she'd ever truly understand why I did what I did. Then I wondered if that even mattered anymore. 6 months had passed, and life inside our small apartment on Birch Street looked nothing like it used to. Maya's art had taken flight. She'd completed her first digital illustration course and immediately enrolled in an advanced character design program. Her portfolio, saved in a folder she'd titled Proof I'm Going Somewhere, had grown to over 40 finished pieces, each one more confident than the last. Her instructor connected her with a teen creative showcase at the Millbrook Community Center, and 3 of Maya's works were selected for public exhibition. Opening night, I stood in front of her centerpiece, a digital painting of a girl climbing out of a cracked porcelain jar, one hand reaching toward light, and I cried in front of strangers for the first time in my life. I didn't care. Some tears aren't about sadness. They're about witnessing someone you love refuse to stay broken. I had made changes too. Real ones. I started therapy with a woman named Dr. Adiola, who specialized in family trauma and generational patterns. Session by session, she helped me dismantle decades of conditioning. The guilt I carried for destroying the family. The voice in my skull that still sounded exactly like my mother calling me dramatic and ungrateful. The reflexive need to apologize for having needs of my own. Dr. Adiola taught me something I'd never been allowed to learn. Protecting your child is not an act of destruction. It's an act of love that nobody in my family ever modeled for me. I also started volunteering at Maya's school, organizing the after-school art club, helping with fundraising events. It connected me to other mothers, other families, other people who valued presence over performance. I built a circle that didn't require me to shrink in order to belong. For the first time in almost 4 decades, I had community that felt safe. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening in March, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Mom. My thumb hovered over the screen for 4 full rings. Every instinct split in two. The daughter who still ached for her mother's love, pulling one direction. The mother who'd learned what that love actually cost, pulling the other. Something made me answer. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the stubborn ghost of a girl who still wished things had been different. Denise. Her voice was thinner, older, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I need to talk to you. I'm listening, Mom. Everything's fallen apart. The fines, I can't pay them all. The IRS wants more documents I don't have. Jolene moved to Harrisburg and won't return my calls. The bakery's been closed for months. Her voice cracked. I'm alone, Denise. Completely alone. I need your help. I closed my eyes and leaned against the kitchen counter. There it was, the old gravitational pull, the invisible rope that had been tied around my waist since childhood, always dragging me back to the center of her orbit where I existed only to serve, to fix, to sacrifice, without recognition. I'm sorry you're going through that, Mom. I genuinely am. Then come help me. You're my daughter. You owe me that. There was that word. Owe. After everything, after the stolen wages, the bruises, the laughter, the shattered trust, she still believed I was indebted to her, that my existence was a transaction with a balance that could never be paid in full, that being her daughter meant being her resource forever. Mom, I don't owe you my daughter's dignity. I asked you for one thing, one simple thing, pay Maya fairly for her work. Instead, you and Jolene used a 13-year-old child as free labor, laughed at her for expecting basic compensation, and called it a learning experience. The only thing she learned was that the people who were supposed to love her the most valued her the least. Silence stretched across the phone line like a wire pulled tight enough to snap. So you're just going to abandon me? Her voice cracked again, but beneath the pain, I could hear something harder, the edge of manipulation I'd been trained since birth to mistake for heartbreak. After everything I sacrificed for you? You still have options, Mom. You have resources, you have contacts, you have Brenda's number, even if she's not answering right now. I didn't take everything from you. I just stopped letting you take everything from me. She hung up without another word. The line went dead, and I stood in my kitchen holding the phone against my chest, listening to my own heartbeat in the silence. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. It hurt the way losing someone hurts. that deep, cellular ache that lives in your bones. Because in many ways, I had lost her. Not that night, and not when I filed those complaints. I'd lost her years ago, maybe decades ago, in the slow, quiet accumulation of every dismissed feeling, every uncompensated hour, every "stop being dramatic, Denise," that taught me my pain wasn't real and my needs weren't valid. But here's what I've learned through all of this, and I need you to hear it clearly. Love does not mean unlimited access. Forgiveness does not require reunion. And choosing your child's safety and self-worth over a toxic family member's comfort is not betrayal. It's the purest form of parenting there is. Maya asked me about it a few weeks later. We were eating dinner, a pasta recipe she'd learned from a YouTube tutorial, a new skill she was quietly proud of. "Mom, do you miss Grandma?" I set my fork down and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. At the girl who'd wanted a laptop, the girl who'd been overworked and dismissed by people who should have cherished her, the girl who was rising anyway, stylus in hand, building entire worlds on a screen she'd bought with her own earned money. "I miss who I wanted her to be," I said. "I miss the grandmother I hoped you'd have. But I don't miss how she made us feel. And I will never miss that." Maya nodded slowly, absorbing something no 13-year-old should have to understand, but handling it with a grace that made me realize she was already stronger than I'd been at twice her age. "I'm glad you chose me, Mom," she said quietly. "Baby, I will choose you every single time. That's not a decision. That's just who I am now." She smiled, small, real, unbreakable. And in that smile, I saw everything. The wound and the healing, the loss and the gain, the little girl who'd been let down and the young woman who was learning that her worth wasn't determined by the people who failed to see it. So, after everything you've heard, if you were standing exactly where I am now, with your own mother asking you to come back after she exploited your child and showed zero remorse, would you give in and call it forgiveness? Or would you choose your freedom, protect your daughter, and call it self-respect? I already know my answer. I hope you know yours. Thank you for listening. Until next time. And that's where Denise's story ends. Not with bitterness, not with revenge, but with a mother who looked at the woman who raised her and said, "You can't have my daughter too." $47,000 in fines, a bakery shut down, an IRS audit still hanging over her head, a sister who ran to Harrisburg and never looked back, and a 13-year-old girl who finally got her laptop, not because somebody felt sorry for her, but because her mother refused to let the people who should have loved her the most treat her like she was worth nothing. Some of you watching this right now know exactly what this feels like. You know what it's like to give your family everything and get silence in return. You know what it's like to hear, "That's just how she is," when what they really mean is, "We need you to keep suffering quietly so the rest of us stay comfortable." If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you've ever had to choose between your mother's approval and your child's dignity, if you've ever been called dramatic for refusing to let someone break your kid the same way they broke you, then this story was for you. Drop a comment below. Tell me, have you ever had to stand between your child and someone in your own family? What did you do? Because I promise you, someone scrolling through these comments right now needs to hear that they're not crazy. They're not ungrateful. They're just awake. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. We drop new episodes every single week. Real emotions, real lessons, real consequences. Like this video, if you believe no child should ever work for free and be laughed at for expecting basic respect, share it with a mother who's fighting a battle nobody else can see. And remember this, the people who raised you don't automatically get access to the people you're raising. Blood makes you related, but behavior makes you family. And the moment someone treats your child like they're disposable, you have every right to treat that relationship the same way. Denise didn't destroy her family. She just stopped volunteering to be destroyed by it. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and never, ever let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting the people who matter most. This has been Untold Revenge Files. We'll see you in the next one.